Hi guys, I'm so sorry I'm not there with you today, but I'm at home because I'm super sick and hoping to go to the doctor this morning. So I figured this was the best way to get your lecture to you. So here's 19-2, the first slide here that has the T4 bacteriophage. This is the structure of a virus that you're responsible to know. This is the one that will be on your test. So make sure you're familiar with this, draw it in your notes and put it on your study guide. So what exactly is a virus? A virus is made up of nucleic acid, protein, and in some case lipids. Hopefully you remember back from chapter 2 that a nucleic acid is DNA or RNA, okay? So basically a real basic virus is going to be made up of DNA or RNA and a protein coat, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. So viruses, they can only reproduce by infecting living cells. They really need a host. They can't survive very long on their own. That's why, like most viruses, if they get on the doorknob or things like that, they don't survive for very long because they're not having a host to keep them living. So viruses, they can differ widely in terms of size and structure. We'll see a picture of them in a moment. They enter our living cells and they use the infected cell to produce more viruses. So our own host cell basically becomes a factory for viruses, and that uses all of our resources, our ribosomes, our mitochondria, all that stuff to make more virus. So what is the structure of a virus? Here's pictures of 3 of them. So the T4 bacteriophage, the one that's all the way on the left, is the one that you're going to be responsible for. The one in the middle you might have heard of before from like history class, because it's the tobacco mosaic virus. It's the one that wiped out like tobacco crops, and they talk about that in history crop some. Sorry. And then influenza virus, that is your flu virus. So again, you're probably most familiar from actually getting infected with that. But that one, the middle and the right one are not going to be on your test, but the T4 bacteriophage is. So make sure, again, you're familiar with that structure. So a typical virus, they're very simple. It's either DNA or RNA and a protein coat. The fancy name for the protein coat is called a capsid. Okay, just again, fancy name for it. It's the part that goes around outside of it. You might remember it from your bacteria diagrams that you did. It was called like a capsule is what they called it for going around the outside. Same thing here as capsid. It has to do with plural or singular. So capsid proteins, their job is to bind to the receptors on the cell's surface to trick our cell. Basically, our host cell has to be tricked to letting the virus inside. Our cells think that the virus is a good guy and they let him in. Once we let our virus in, the cell then uses, or the virus then uses our cell to transcribe and translate, if you remember that from chapter 12, transcription and translation, and to make more of the viral capsid protein, so more of the protein coat, and to make more copies of the DNA. And it basically destroys our host cell DNA. So our good DNA is gone, and we're left with only the bad virus DNA. So most viruses are very specific to the ones they infect. They don't just infect any type of cell. Example that we've actually already heard about is the bacteriophage, because they only infect bacteria. So how exactly does a virus cause an infection? Well, it basically is going to disrupt what's going on in our body. So once it's inside our host cell, it has a choice. It can either replicate immediately and kill the host cell immediately, okay, so basically killing off our tissue, or it can replicate but not kill the host cell immediately and keep replicating more and more and more, making more and more virus. So a retrovirus, you actually have heard of this before because an example of a retrovirus is AIDS. A retrovirus, instead of having DNA and a protein coat, it has RNA and a protein coat. So when they infect their cells, they actually make a DNA copy of their RNA. So they actually work backwards, okay? So the DNA would be inserted into the DNA of the host cell, but the DNA of the virus came from RNA, not DNA. So again, it's copied backwards. An example of this would be AIDS. So viruses, they have to infect a living cell in order to grow and reproduce because they can't survive on their own. So they take advantage of our host cell's respiration, basically our host cell's ability to make energy and anything like that. That's how they do that, and they use the host cell, so they're kind of like a parasite. So that's the end of this lecture. You made it to the end of 19.2. You now should be able to do the 19.2 worksheet. I will tell you there's a few questions on the 19.2 worksheet that are not covered in this lecture, and I have made them extra credit. So those of you who actually listened to this will know that information. So those questions that weren't covered in the lecture will be extra credit, so they can't hurt you on the worksheet. Thanks again for listening, guys, and I hope to be back tomorrow.